Hi everybody, I think we're going to get going with this next session. If everybody's okay, I'll start now. I just want to say hello and welcome. My name is Deirdre Corby, and I'm going to be looking at a little bit around evidence supporting assistive technology for today's information. What I'm going to try and do today, folks, is just tell you a little bit about assistive technology. If any of you are interested in assistive technology in particular, you could spend a lot of time looking at this topic. You could do courses on assistive technology, courses on aspects of assistive technology. So in an hour session, I'm not going to be able to cover all the things that you might want to know. But what I want to do is just give you a little taste of what assistive technology can be about. I'm going to very quickly, run through some definitions and categories, a little bit about some of the types of assistive technology that you might use. I am going to talk a little bit at the end about the barriers, and I think when we're looking at something like assistive technology, we need to look at the ethics. And anything that involves an intervention, whether it's a therapeutic intervention or any intervention at all, or anything we're going to ask people to use or to try, we do need to consider ethics. At the very end of the slide also, I have the link to the MS Ireland section on their website about assistive technology, and I would encourage you to have a look at their website, if you haven't already, about what they've got there, because they've got some good sources and information around assistive technology already. The MS Society have already thought about this. So I'm going to try basically to look at how assistive technology can impact on the quality of life and how it can help people, can be an aid to improving care. And it's really, all I'm trying to do today is give you an awareness of assistive technology. Now, there's a good few of you here in the room, and some of you might know more about assistive technology than I do, or you might know more about specific aspects of assistive technology. So, for example, a good example would be if there's any speech and language therapists here in the room, you would know an awful lot about alternative and augmentative communication, which would be seen as an aspect of assistive technology. For others who have other backgrounds, you may have particular aspects of assistive technology you know a lot about. So I want to just kind of add to that and create a bit more awareness, hopefully. So this is just a picture with different assistive technology devices, just so that it's not all talking slides. But there are so many different types of devices around. And things from phones that can speak to you, phones where you can put pictures instead of numbers, all different kinds of things you can use to help people that might help them to be more independent and not to have to ask for help. So assistive technology really is about any kind of a broad range of devices, services, strategies, practices that are going to help people to be more independent, that they're going to help to make things their everyday activities easier. And I do focus a lot on everyday activities because what we do every day is the important thing, isn't it? So any item or piece of equipment that you can buy, or you can buy commercially, or have it specially modified or adapted, that can help to increase or maintain people's functional capabilities. Now, the thing about assistive technology is not about replacing something or not giving somebody something that they cannot do. You don't want to do that. You don't want to introduce a piece of technology that somebody can't use and there's going to be another thing they can't do. So it's really important that technology is not a negative thing, that it's a positive thing. So, for example, all of us have a mobile phone, usually stuck onto our hip where we can reach it very quickly. And if any of you have got any teenagers, they can text in their pockets, they can do all kinds of things with their mobile phones. We all have technology. But if someone said to you, I want you to have another mobile phone tomorrow, a different one, most of you would say, oh no, it's fine. I'm fine with the one I have. I'm able to use it. I really don't want to learn to use another mobile phone. So those are the kind of things we need to think. So is what's there already working fine? Are they happy with their technology? Are we just looking at the next fancy thing? Or is it going to make a big difference? So it's about looking to see what's going to help somebody. Either modified, like a modified mobile phone, for example, or something that's specially made for them. So we need to consider when we're looking at technology, the evaluation of the needs of the individual. Now, I haven't got time today to go into assessment, but I have one slide that I look at assessment a tiny bit. But also you have to consider the purchase or the lease of a device. Now, we all know that finances are a big deal, and that if people are going to spend a lot of money on a piece of equipment, we want to make sure they're actually going to use the piece of equipment, and it's really going to benefit them in the long run. And also the selection and design and the customization, the adaptation of any piece of equipment you might buy for somebody or get someone to get, And I think I probably should have this in capital letters or have it on a slide of its own: maintenance. There is no point in somebody getting some new assistive technology, it breaks down 2 days later, and there's no maintenance contract. So there's a lot of things happen about assistive technology. People get a new wheelchair or a new piece of technology, and it's great, and then it breaks down, or the charger doesn't work, or something like this happens. So if you are involved in buying assistive technology for people or encouraging people to buy it, certainly try and see there's some kind of maintenance contract associated with the purchase. Because if it's something somebody's using every day, it will of course break down. We know that's unfortunately what happens. And then assistive technology is also about the coordination and use of other therapies, people working together, and it's about training our technical assistants. So we're going back to the same example. So say, for example, someone gets a new power wheelchair, and you've already assessed the person, and you know they can use it. They have the capabilities, the cognitive and functional capabilities to use the power chair. They still need training. And when you buy a power chair, there's no training comes in a package with it. So sometimes we need to make sure that the people have training to use the equipment that they have. And so the other person that's going to need training is the carer, or the family member, or the staff. So again, if you've got a piece of equipment that only the person that uses the equipment can use it, that's going to be a problem. So it's about who needs to be trained, not just the individual who's going to use the equipment. So it's about thinking, what do we need to consider with assistive technology? So these are very basic categories of assistive technology that I use. The American categories are a little bit more detailed, but these are ones I'm just using for today, because I don't want to get into medical devices and things like this, because it confuses people. So basically we're looking at categories of assistive technology for activities of daily living, like washing, dressing, eating, cooking, all those kind of things. Computer applications, which a lot of people associate assistive technology with. Mobility solutions, which I know a lot of you are concerned with, because mobility solutions are very important for people who have MS. Environmental controls is another category of assistive technology, and I suppose you could simply think about it. We're in this room. What's controlling the atmosphere? There's air conditioning on. How is that air conditioning controlled? There's how many of us in the room, and some of us hate the air conditioning. Some of us like it. Some of us are too hot. Some of us are too cold. So how do we, environmental controls are always a big thing. Technology for the elderly is another category of assistive technology, and it's a well talked about now in relation to technology for the elderly, because with the strategies that are looking to move people from hospital to home, there's a lot of talk of assistive technology and the role it's going to play. Lots of debate we could have about that. If we had lots of time, we could talk about all the ethics and the complications if we're going to bring in all kinds of smart technology to people's homes and monitor their activities and monitor their health. And that's certainly something that is being looked at, and certainly a lot of research going into how people can be monitored. And some of you are already being monitored without you even knowing it, because some of you have those stepping things, you probably have them on your wrist, where you're counting your 10,000 steps a day. And or whatever you happen to be doing, they're smiling because I see 2 people are there, and they're probably having a competition with their friends about, but who knows how many steps you're doing. So it's what we've got to think about this. We've got to think about what technology actually means and what it means down in the future. And this is actually not part of the lecture, but I'll say it anyway. There was some lady that passed away in the States, and they discovered that she was alive after her husband said she wasn't, because they could see her stepper, how many steps she'd taken. So it's very interesting what technology can have a big impact on our lives. And then, of course, home safety solutions. And this is a big, big thing. There's a lot of people at home. Now, we know this. We're focusing on MS today, so I'm kind of moving into different areas. But there's a lot of people at home, and they lose the chance to stay at home because their carers are worried about them, rather than them actually being able to manage at home. So it's about where could technology come in there. And sometimes the home safety solutions are actually not for the person with a disability themselves, they're actually for their carers, so they're not worried about them. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing if it means, because there has been some research done with older people, and they say they don't care. I'll take the technology once I can stay at home. I will take all the technology in the world once I can stay at my own house. Even if I don't like the technology, I'm okay with it. So we've got to consider, what we're looking at here. And then the big area is alternative and augmented communication. And that is a massive area of assistive technology as well. And it's changing all the time. And the example I use in that as well, if anyone has a lot of children with autism now, for example, are using mobile phones for communication, using different apps, and it's just fantastic use of technology. So sometimes you can see technology, it's very easy to see how that transforms someone's life straight away. If they've got a piece of technology that allows them to communicate by pointing to pictures or pointing to symbols or whatever it happens to be, it's great to see that technology can have a very, very positive influence on some people straight away. So assistive technology and its use. Now if you notice, you'll notice this quote is from a book in 2002. This is the book I use all the time for modules I teach on assistive technology, and the book has been updated loads of times, but it's still really basically the same. And they say that the Cook and Hussey, they've written a lot about assistive technology, and they say that the use is increasing. Now we know the use of technology is increasing. All of you know that. You know by the type of television you have at home than the type of television you had at home, 20 years ago. You know what I mean? That everything is changing. You can look at YouTube on your television. There's loads of things you can do now that you might have done even 10 years ago. And I'm not that old, but my children still can't believe that I actually didn't have a mobile phone for years. They thought there was never such a time when there wasn't mobile phones. So it's about kind of technology even in 10 years or 20 years has changed an awful lot. So it's about the use of technology is increasing. But assistive technology, and I think assistive, that word is really, really important. You're not trying to replace what somebody can currently do. That's really, really important. So you don't give somebody a piece of assistive technology for something they can already do. But you do give someone a piece of assistive technology to build on what they can do already. So it's about functional results. So it's about somebody carrying out an activity independently, if possible, with assistive technology. So people that are recommending devices, which might be a lot of you here, you need to make sure that the needs of the individual are going to be met by the piece of assistive technology that you're going to suggest for them or help them to get assessed for. And that can be hard, because sometimes people who are working with people with disability actually don't know that much about assistive technology themselves. And that's not a criticism, that's the reality. Because there isn't that many places to find out about all the different types of assistive technology. So sometimes you have to do some research yourself before you find out whether you should even introduce the topic of assistive technology. So if you're looking at an assessment for assistive technology, there's 4 things you need to think about. You need to think about the person who may use assistive technology and what they want. There's lots of research on that different genders have a different approach to technology. There's research on different cultures. They've approached a different approach to technology. We live in a multicultural society. People have different views on whether technology should be used or not. Then the activity that the person wants to do. Like, for example, people who are going to school or university will have a whole different need for technology than somebody, for example, maybe who's at work. So what do they want what do they want to do? And what you think is important for someone to do might not be what they think is important. So it's about getting that right. And then the assistive technology itself. And I know we can't but talk about costs, it's one of the things we have to talk about. And there is no assistive technology grant in Ireland. You can't apply to a particular department and say, I want to apply to the assistive technology department, because it doesn't exist. So we have to consider, where is the funding going to come from for assistive technology? And in places like the university where I work, they have an assistive technology department and a specific education fund that's European based that gives them money so they can buy assistive technology for the students. But it belongs to the university, and the students have to give it back when they're finished their course. They are allowed to keep the software on their laptops. But it's about what is the kind of things, what's the assistive technology for? And what do people want it for, and are they going to use it? And my advice to anybody would be, if you're getting someone a piece of assistive technology, make sure it's something that they use every single day, multiple times a day, so that it's going to benefit them every day, not just once a week or once a month. And then the context, where they're going to use it and who's going to be with them. Like I said earlier, if you're introducing assistive technology to somebody that wants to use it themselves, what's their carer situation? Does their carer have access to the same assistive technology? Do they understand the use of it? Do they need some training? Do they need some information? Do they need ongoing training, ongoing support? That's the kind of thing you need to think of with your assessment. Now, the other thing to think about as well, if you were to do, in some places when they advise assistive technology assessment, there's a whole range of professionals are involved in that assessment. Again, when we heard about the team this morning, when the ladies were speaking about their team, they were missing one essential member of the team. And that can impact on your assessment. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to go for this? And so sometimes you might need to go to organisations like Enable Ireland to ask them for a bit of support. You might need to go somewhere like the CRC, Client Services Department, ask them around what's support about assistive technology, or obviously the MS Society themselves might have some advice for you where you could go to look around assistive technology. And occupational therapists are obviously a great source of support in this, because occupational therapists have an understanding of assistive technology, and that's included in their training. So they're not assistive technology specialists alone, but they would have a knowledge of assistive technology that might be very useful to you. There's loads of different types of assistive technology. There's low-tech devices, things that are going to be very cheap, and high-tech devices. Now, if I were to give you a quick difference, low-tech ones are ones you don't need a battery or to plug in. High-tech ones, you've got to plug them in, you've got to have a battery. Now, that's not a very official definition, but that's essentially it. So a low-tech device could be something simple like a special grip that allows you to hold your knife and fork yourselves. And a high-tech piece of high-tech device might be something like a very, very high-tech power wheelchair that raises up and down, does everything that you want it to do. So they're both very different types of technologies and obviously very different cost. So this is just an example of a grip to help someone open their front door. It's a grip that you can add onto the key, something very, very simple, but it can make a massive difference to people that they can actually open the front door by themselves without having to have someone come and open the door for them. So those are very simple, low-tech pieces of technology that can be bought off the shelf, not specially made for anybody, and you can just buy them. And they're great, simple things like that. And you don't need a health and safety organisation, or don't need to call in the health and safety rep and have this checked out. It's just a key grip, okay? And you don't need insurance for this one, okay? So I think this is one of the issues with technology. It brings in this worry about insurance and health and safety and all this kind of thing. Some of these low-tech devices are simply, you can just buy them in a shop. We can use them ourselves. We don't have to, sometimes it's not that complicated. There's another simple one, a little grip to open the fridge door. Can you see it properly on the screen? Yeah, like it's something really simple. And it could make a massive difference in someone's life. And this is another one that I really like this one, because it's to pull down the clothes hanger. Again, you don't need a health and safety thing for this. You just need a fancy new bedroom equipment, you know. Like some of the new wardrobes have these fitted anyway. They're not special. They're just stuff that's there. Simple things that make a massive difference. And like I was saying to the group earlier, the man that originally designed this piece of equipment, he was visiting a friend who used a wheelchair, and when he went up to his bedroom to get something, he noticed his friend had all his clothes on the floor. And his friend says, because I can't reach up into the wardrobe. So he made this simple device for him years and years ago, and now this device is commonly available in wardrobes and fancy hotels. Not the Radisson, there isn't one here. And or else maybe I didn't spot it. So high-tech assistive technology can be things like face-to-face communication aids. You can have aids where I can type in what I want to say, and on the other side it's coming out in writing and you can read it. And we all know, I suppose Stephen Hawkins is the easiest one to pick, isn't he? He's such a well-known man, and he has his voice synthesizer, and as far as I know, he has patented the voice as well, so nobody else can have that voice. I think I'm right about that. And written communication, a whole load of software and hardware that can help with that, to help you to write. Different types of mouses that you can put on your computer. You can have a bigger screen, you can have a bigger keyboard, you can have different access to the keyboard. Loads of ways. You can have input devices, they can just plug them into the side. You can use your normal laptop and have an additional keyboard to the side. There's lots of simple things that can make your access to computers easier. And there's some really good stuff for people with visual impairment. Really, really helpful stuff that you can have. You can get the text read to you. All things like that. There's loads of education aids. Now, interestingly enough, in DCU where I work, the biggest education aid. Can anybody guess what disability people are using assistive technology for most? Anybody guess? Yeah, they're using tablets. What condition are they using assistive technology for? Yeah, dyslexia, yeah. There's loads of software now for dyslexia that makes it so much easier for people to read and write. Writing in particular, yeah, and a lot of students are using it. And it's great because students just ask for it. There's no stigma or anything. They just say, oh, that will really help me, and it's very much accepted. It's great. There's no kind of, because in the past there was a lot of stigma associated with certain things, and I think I'm right that a lot of the stigma is going now. I think technology has really helped that. Because like if you give a child with autism a communication aid on a phone, everybody's got a phone, so it looks perfectly fine. I think that makes a big difference to people. There's loads of education aids, and obviously it depends on what's needed by the individual at the time. Now I know for people with MS, mobility is a big issue, and there's loads of different mobility aids, and some of you are very familiar with them, and they would be associated with assistive technology as well. But then there's also environmental controls. Have you heard of environmental controls? Yeah, so and smart houses, have you heard of smart homes? Yeah, they're kind of, basically where the house can very easily do everything for you. You can just press a button and the curtains open or close, and you can, have a remote control for the heating, for the lighting, for your television, for your phone, for your front doorbell, all this type of thing. And there's a talk now that we should be creating homes that grow with us, so that as we get older, that our home can adapt to our new needs. And like there's even some homes where the walls move and all kinds of fancy things happen, that so we don't have to leave home, that the home now suits us. So there's lots of things to consider around assistive technology. But we all have to eat every day and do all the basic things. So you can get simple bits of technology to help you with cooking. And this, it's hard to actually see, but this is a talking microwave. So it literally tell you, it's ready now. And if you press in a button and say, do you want 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever. So it'll actually talk to you so you can see what's happening. And these are mainly things for grips. But my favourite one is the one for the kettle. You see the kettle down there? Because in Ireland, when you go to someone's house, the first thing they do is offer you a cup of tea. And it's great if you can give people a simple device that they can make the cup of tea themselves. And often a kettle is a heavy thing to lift, especially when it's full of water, and if your fine motor movement isn't great, you might be worried that people will spill and hurt themselves. And little devices like a kettle holder can help. And again, these are easy to buy, they're commercially available. So those are the kind of things we might think about, everyday activities that assistive technology could help. Dressing aids, simple things like a shoehorn to help put on your shoes. Again, there's no health and safety audit needed for that. So you can get simple aids like that. You can have things like to help you put on their clothes. That one there is the one with the red cardigan. It's a tiny little ring that you can add onto the zip, and someone can just pull up and down the zip themselves. So tiny things like that can make a big difference to people's lives if they feel more independent. My grandmother is 103 and is living independently at home, and the only thing she cannot do is get one arm into that cardigan. It really annoys her, So those little things can make a big difference to people. So there's lots of things you can do to help you with their dexterity, reaching, all those kind of things. Washing, bathing, toileting, all this kind of stuff. There's loads of technology out there, simple things that you can add. Now, this tap is sitting there on its own. It looks a bit weird, doesn't it? What that is, you can get taps that will regulate the water, the heat of the water. So if someone is putting it won't allow the water to be too hot going into the bath, things like that. Or there's also switches you can get that if the bath fills, it'll knock it off at a certain height. Just little things like that. And then simple things like grips and raised toilet seats and all that kind of thing, some of you will be already familiar with. Simple bits of technology that make a massive difference to people's lives. Transferring is a big one. And this kind of, see little white kind of cushion thing? That's available to buy. There's 2 or 3 pages in the Argus catalogue where you can buy bits of technology. And that little thing is just a cushion that swivels. Tiny swivel cushion. If you put it on the seat of a car, someone can get in and out of the car much easier. Because as they turn, it'll help them turn. Very simple thing. I bought it for my father when he was alive, and he was able to get in and out of the car by himself by just this cushion. So little things like that can make a massive difference to people's independence. So there's lots of different things we can use in assistive technology. So the whole idea of assistive technology is to support people. It's not meant to be replacing it. And it's meant to enable people without orphaning. And what that means is not abandoning them. So you're not giving them a piece of technology and say, bye now, you've got the technology, you're sorted, I'll see you in a year's time. It's not leaving them just the technology to replace human contact. It's about facilitating meaningful occupation. And if you give somebody something that they can use every day, that makes their life more meaningful, they will use it. But if you give people something that they never really wanted in the first place, it'll end up under the bed gathering dust. That's what will happen it. Or it'll be a clothes rack. What it was never intended for. So you need to see what is going to be meaningful for people. And the other issue is for safety. Now, ethically you can have questions about having too much technology in somebody's house, for example, to monitor how long they spend in bed or how long they sit in the chair. But for safety reasons, technology can mean people can stay at home. So if you put in simple technology like someone's cooking something and they forget to turn off the gas and you've got an automatic knock-off switch, very simple thing, or if they're boiling something and you've got an automatic switch that if it boils over it'll go off, or the alarm will set off to let them know you've left something on the cooker, whatever it happens to be, those safety issues can reassure the carers and make it easier for someone to stay at home longer. So it's about looking at weighing the benefits of assistive technology. So it can help in very simple ways. So assistive technology can help to be an extension of what someone can do already. So very simple things like diaries. I bet you all keep a diary, do you? Like everyone has a diary. But you can have speaking diaries, you can have speaking calendars, alarm clocks, you can have recipes, simple recipes that can walk people through step by step their recipes. You can have manuals, all kinds of simple technologies that can extend on people's current abilities. And that can really help people to be more independent. The one I mentioned earlier was these smart homes, and some people nodded and said, yes, I've heard of smart homes. If you are interested, if you haven't ever heard of a smart home before, you can actually watch some videos on YouTube that will literally walk you through different smart homes, where somebody, for example, who might be using a wheelchair can literally get around the whole house by themselves by the fact that it's designed to allow them, for example, they can walk into a room and say, television on, open curtains, close curtains, all this kind of thing, where they can actually have a house that is totally smart. They can say heating turn up, heating turn down, heating turn off, all this type of thing. So there is a definite move towards us being more, the buildings that can interact with us on an intelligent level. This is becoming more common and make the lives of occupants easier. Now, that sounds all very new age, doesn't it, and very kind of high tech. But we're already doing some of that already. Like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, people already have. A lot of you already have timers on your heating. Some of you are probably using your smartphone to switch off your heating or switch it on or whatever it happens to be. And for people who have a disability, this existing technology can be adapted to make it easier for them. So those are the kind of smart homes we're looking at. But then if we look at things like telecare and remote monitoring, we get into a more complex area. Because there is a lot of remote monitoring being looked at and a lot of research happening at the moment around telehealth and telecare. Do you know about some of that? Yeah. So for example, there's some of the Scandinavian countries are looking very closely at remote monitoring. So an example would be, say you have somebody who's at home and you're worried about them being on their own. And so you might have a sensor in their bed. So you know when they get up, because the sensor it's all linked to a one computer. So the sensor, you can monitor when somebody gets up. Then you can monitor how long they spend in their chair in the sitting room. You can monitor if they put on their kettle, if they put on the cooker, if they put on the heating. See where I'm going here? So you can monitor their activities all day long. So say, for example, you're worried that somebody isn't eating, or they're staying in bed all day, and the carer comes in and says, "Had you a good day?" "Oh yes, I had a great day. I had my dinner. I did this. I did that." But your machine is telling you that they stayed in bed all day. So there's some ethical stuff here, isn't there? I can see a few people frowning at me, thinking, "What is she doing here? Big Brother is watching." So this is what we're looking at. In some Scandinavian countries, they're looking at people who are living independently but are being remotely monitored by one kind of monitoring station. So you've only one carer looking after a number of people. So if they can see that somebody hasn't had something to eat, they can go and check on that person. If we don't have enough people to look after us as we get older, is that the way we're going? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, we've got to think about this. Because there is ethics around that, isn't there? Yeah. And the example I gave earlier was, there was a gentleman and he was inclined to wander, and his family were worried about him, so they had a wandering device. And they would call to visit him every day, and they'd say, "How'd you get on today?" And he'd say, "Oh, I was fine today. I didn't go outside the door." But they knew he'd been out 5 times because they could see it. on the recording device. And they're thinking, what's going on here? They were worried that he didn't remember that he'd been out. And this went on for quite a while, and he would be fine when they came to check on him. And in the end they said, and he would always say, oh no, I never go outside the door. And because, can anybody guess what was happening? He was going out, wasn't he? He was going to the bookies. He didn't want them to know he was going to the bookies. So he denied ever going outside the door, but they knew he was going out 4 or 5 times because they could see it. So ethically, was it any of their business that he was going to the bookies? Of course it wasn't. But he knew he didn't want them. So it's a kind of, you've got to kind of weigh up what's really going to help somebody and what's going to be invasive. And there's, the whole ethical stuff we could talk about, is very interesting. This whole thing of monitoring technologies, which is becoming there's a lot of monitoring going on. Like all of us know, I'm sure a few of you are on Facebook. So say, for example, you go onto booking.com and you say, I'm going to go to London for a week. And you look up London. Then you go onto your Facebook the following day. How many places in London are you offered? Fascinating stuff, isn't it? So we've got to look and see, with wandering technologies and stuff, when people are leaving the house, we can track people where they are. Now some parents think this is a great idea for their teenagers. But even if you track them, they're still going to go there. So all you're doing is increasing your anxiety and stress levels. Sometimes we don't need to know. So it's about what is the right thing and the wrong thing. I'm just getting you to think about it. I'm not saying what I agree. I think there's a lot to be said for, for example, that poor lady that died in Dublin, if you remember, she was found near IKEA. She had wandered off. If she even had a place tracker on her phone, they could have found her. And I know a lot of nursing homes are using monitoring devices to keep people safe. So I'm not saying what's right or wrong. It's all individual, isn't it? We've got to look at the situation, we've got to look at the people and what they want themselves. So falls, one of the things with people with MS is they can be prone to having falls. And there is some technology, and there's no technology that's going to catch you as you fall. It doesn't exist here, doesn't it? But technology can monitor when you're more likely to fall, where your gait is disimproving, and the technology can help you identify where falls are likely and then hopefully stop them. Because falls is something that really affects people. And then the whole thing I talked about earlier, the fire detection and the gas appliances, looking at what are the things we can do to help people be safe at home and stay at home. People want to be at home. We know that. All the research says that. The government wants everyone to stay at home because it's cheaper. Okay? Now, I know it's because they really want us to all have a wonderful life, but the reality of it is it's cheaper. Okay? Let's be really blunt about this. So we need to see, professionals are tasked to ensure people can stay at home because that's where people want to be. And so if assistive technology can keep people at home, then you could argue that professionals are neglectful if they don't investigate assistive technology for the clients that they work with. Now that's a big jump, isn't it? But we need to be, if you're a professional and you're working with people and you know nothing about assistive technology, maybe you need to look into it a bit and see, is there something more I could find out about assistive technology that would help the people that I work with? Now that's not to frighten you, obviously, because we can't be experts in everything, but we can at least have an awareness. And there has been some research that has shown that where professionals are more aware of assistive technology, there's more referrals to assistive technology services. So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So if you know more about it, you're more likely to hopefully get some to help people. So there's lots of stuff that can help us, simple stuff that's being used already all the time. A lot of you, your GP appointment, you get a text message. My dentist sends the text messages to make sure that we're not missing our appointments. There's little reminders on smartphones that we can use, things like that all the time. So in relation to ethics, and I think we have to talk about ethics and assistive technology, we have to consider people's privacy, we have to consider people's autonomy, and the say that word for me, somebody. Obtrusiveness, yes. If the technology is bulky, if they don't like the look of it, all these kind of things we've got to consider. And we've got to consider the outside world, stigma and social contact. But just going back to the individual approach to technology, and I'm kind of going back a few steps now because I forgot to say this earlier. So say, for example, we have somebody who's living at home, and to keep them safe, we give them a monitoring alarm that they can hit a button if they fall or something, right? The reality of it is our understanding of what an emergency is and somebody else's understanding of what an emergency is can be different. So an example would be, so you give somebody a monitoring device, they can hit a button and call for help, and they fall quite badly and hurt themselves. Do you think that's an emergency? Yeah. That person might not necessarily think that. They might think, okay, I've fallen, my hip feels a bit sore, but if I just lie here for 2 hours, my son calls in at 6 o'clock anyway. So that's just something to think about. What we consider as an emergency isn't necessarily what somebody else considers as an emergency. So there needs to be a lot of work with people around assistive technology and to understand who's at the end of that phone or what the purpose of the technology is. So it's about making sure that the technology is individual to that person. And there's a lot of people, a lot of professionals have an understanding of where the needs of the person in the long term as well. So we need to be very careful with assistive technology that if we are involved, say for example, in assessing someone for assistive technology, organising a new piece of equipment, like this has happened on a number of occasions where by the time the equipment arrived, the person wasn't able to use it. So we need to be very careful about that. That if we're involved, that we know what's going to happen next. That we know how long it takes to get the technology, what's the backup, what's the maintenance, what's the repair, all that kind of stuff. That we don't end up in a situation where we're actually adding to somebody's distress. Now, I'm not saying anybody would do that consciously, but technology is a hard thing to get right. And like, for example, some houses cannot be retrofitted with electrical equipment. So you need to see you need to know about that kind of engineering stuff. So sometimes you might need to call in somebody like an engineer to say, look, I was going to suggest to this family that they put in a monitor to help with safety. Can the house actually be adapted for that? Those practical things you might have to think of around assistive technology. One very simple piece of assistive technology that absolutely changed the life of a family. They introduced, their father was living at home with them and he would get up 4 times a night. And they were always getting up 4 times a night as well. It was getting quite stressful. So the assistive technology people did a very simple thing. When he would wake up and put his foot out of the bed, his lamp would come on beside the bed. And then when he stood up, the light would come on in the hall. And then when he walked towards the hall, the light would come on in the bathroom. And then when he finished in the bathroom, the light would go off behind him and the next light would come on. And the lights led him back to his room. And it just changed everybody's life. He was able to get up during the night. Nobody had to get up as well. And it was a very simple piece of technology. It wasn't invasive. There was no problem. And it made a big difference to his life. So assistive technology can be something very simple. And they didn't have to change the electrical things in the house or anything. It was a very simple fix. So think about that. What is the design of technology and who could it help? Preferably, if you're introducing technology, something that's going to help straight away and that people can use every day. Those are the kind of things to think about. Because the big problem is lots of assistive technology is abandoned. Unfortunately, research has proven that people get all kinds of fancy technology. You've got people fundraising left, right and centre for really fancy technology, and it gets abandoned. And it is a problem. And sometimes there can be complex reasons why people abandon assistive technology. Like, for example, if somebody gets a new and very expensive wheelchair, they may need some training. So people might do a whole pile of fundraising and no training. So the person can't use it, and then the technology gets left there. And the example I always give in relation to wheelchairs is a gentleman who was actually from Donegal. They did some fundraising for him and they bought him an absolutely fabulous power chair because he needed a power chair, and he was able to use it, no problem with his ability to use it or anything like that. And they came in and said, "Are you thrilled now with your power chair?" He said, "I hate it." And they say, "Why do you hate it?" He says, "Because the lovely girl that came every day to push me around doesn't come anymore." And she knew all the local gossip. So we've got to think about that too. That's a very simple thing. But the local people were thrilled with the fundraising they'd done. He was quite happy being pushed around. And he also didn't have the special car you need to put the power wheelchair in. So sometimes we've got to think about the ethics of all that as well. Where is the technology helping? So those are things, and that's why sometimes people abandon certain types of technology. Then people's attitudes towards technology can make a difference. And it seems to be a big thing. I don't think so much now, but maybe I'm wrong, that people feel that technology makes them different, so therefore they don't want to use it. Because sometimes that can put people off technology and they just abandon it as well. And also, if you don't consider the person's opinion in the technology and their preference, then it'll be abandoned. And also, changes in functional abilities or activities. So maybe someone had a piece of technology to help them in university, but they're moving into a job and it doesn't work anymore, it'll just be left there. So we need to make sure it's going to suit for the time they need it. The lack of motivation to use the device or to do the task. Now there is some research that says, and I'm glad I'm behind here, so these can't get me, that older people aren't as good with technology as younger people. There's some research to say that women aren't as good as men with some technology. So there's different research that says different groups and different people have different motivations around technology. I don't know. I certainly think that the use of technology has changed in the last number of years, and everybody appears to be using technology of some description. Then the other thing is the lack of any training that I mentioned, especially for people who may have some cognitive problems. If somebody can use a piece of technology and they have some cognitive problems, they may be able to use it in that context at that time. But then you move them to another context at a different time and they can't use the same technology. Now, the only way I could explain it to you, so say most of you probably drive, do you? So if you borrow somebody's car, it takes you a while, doesn't it, to get into this, how to use a new car. So we might be able to drive our car, but we may not be able to transfer a skill as quickly to another car. So sometimes the technology may work in that context, but not in another context. So it's important that people are trained in every place where they may use the technology, not just one place. Not just like a sterile clinical environment. That's not where they're going to use it, they're going to use it at home. So that's the kind of thing to look at. So training is important in any technology. So if the device doesn't work, people will just leave it there, of course. If it doesn't meet their demands, they'll just leave it there. If they don't have the information, they won't use it. It doesn't look nice, people won't use it. And there's loads and loads of research. And if you're really, really interested, I can send you like 20 articles on why people abandon assistive technology. But it's still being used and it's becoming more common than before. So you need to say, does this do what it says on the tin? Is this going to do what somebody wants it to do? Is it going to help them get to the shop? Is it going to help them cook the dinner? Is it going to help them get themselves dressed or give themselves a shower? Is this technology going to do this? Is it going to allow them to call their son or daughter without having to pick up the phone? They just press a button on the picture. Is that going to help them that way? Is there going to be an actual practical use of the technology? The expectations must meet the reality. And I can't say this enough. We do not want to give people something that is something else they cannot do. We don't want to do that. That's really, really what we don't want to do. Is it simple and intuitive to use? Now, unfortunately, most of us expect things to work like straight away nowadays. So is it intuitive? Can we use it fairly quickly and easily? And is the training tailored to meet the requirements? And that means, and that's where the professionals come in, where you can say, look, I know that this person would like to use this technology, but actually one day of training won't do. They need a day of training and they need the training repeated for a month. So the training has to meet the individual requirements. And if it's based on the use of the device. Now, what I was saying to the group earlier on, I think is probably a really good bit of advice. If you do decide you want to help someone to get some technology, and particularly if it's a very expensive piece of technology, try and get the manufacturers to lend it to you for 2 weeks. Don't buy it until the person has had a chance to try it out. Because if you can get a loan of it from the manufacturer for a week or two, you'll have a fair idea. Because sometimes it's very hard, even with all the best assessment in the world, to decide if they're actually going to use the technology, and you've spent a lot of money on a piece of technology that just mightn't get what they need. And is there some kind of technical support? Peer support is a great idea. If there's other people with the same condition that are using the technology and they can show somebody how this wheelchair works, how this app on the computer works or whatever, that would be brilliant, to give people some additional support around that. So technology is very positive. There's lots of stuff that can be offered for people, either from a communication point of view, from a safety point of view. But your individual person that you want to support, you need to have them with you from the very, very beginning. Now, having said all of that, There is one organisation in the UK and they've turned the whole assessment idea on its head. They actually don't assess the individual first at all. They've decided that that doesn't work. And what they do is they train all the staff in assistive technology use first. And then they offer the assessments. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but what they found was that even though they did all their assessments the right way, they got the technology for somebody, that then the staff, if the staff couldn't use it, it was abandoned. So they have a staff training scheme on assistive technology before they do any assessments. And they actually, before they do the assessment, I think they do their consent even before that as well. They do the opposite way around to what you expect assessment to be, and they found that useful. So you have to decide, okay, how are we going to see is this any good? As a professional, you want to make sure there's some kind of a positive outcome from assistive technology use. Now, some things can be very simple. You give somebody a mobility aid and they can independently go down to the shop. That's a way of measuring the outcome. But it has to be measured in behavioural terms. There must be something you can see that's different. It's not just kind of, oh yeah, he feels better about himself. You need some kind of way of measuring how the technology has actually helped. So the outcome should be considered in terms of the person's employability, that they're able to go back to work, and that was spoken about earlier on, the importance of people getting back to work, their performance of activities of daily living, and satisfaction with the device. So if you can say, since he got that piece of assistive technology, he's now able to go back to work because he can independently travel, or he can independently use the computer at work, that's fantastic. That's an outcome. The outcome of using the devices are concerned not just to the people, but also to the professionals, funding bodies, administrators and manufacturers. Because if we encourage people to use more assistive technology that helps them, then it becomes cheaper for everybody. Because, as we all know, anything new is more expensive. Anything that has to be very specially adapted is more expensive. But the more commonly it's used, then it gets cheaper for everybody that would use it, which would be really good. So funding bodies are interested in the outcomes as well. Now, unfortunately, sometimes, and we know this about Ireland, we're great for starting stuff. We're good at the assessment, the implementation, and sometimes we don't follow up as much as we should. But for assistive technology, particularly when we're trying to get funding for it, you need to consider that as well. So if you were, there's kind of a big group here, and I have a case study as well, but because of the nature of the room, we might not get to the case study, but I might just give it out and you can have a think about it. What do you think, as a group, the role of general technology is? Like, for example, if something is marketed as special or an aid, does that make a difference? And do you think that people would be more, if we could get people more open to general technology, would they be more inclined to use assistive technology? Is this a complicated double question I'm asking here? So if technology is what we all use, are people more inclined to use special technology? What do you think? Do you think we should encourage people to use technology more all the time? Yeah. If it becomes, if people are used to technology, then it's not a big deal. So introducing some special aid doesn't seem such a big deal then. And it's easier for people to be willing to try things. The reality of it is, most people, and research is saying that most people would prefer technology than to have to leave their home, even if they don't like technology. So the reality of it is, as professionals, the role is, I suppose, to consider where can I find out more about assistive technology and where can I offer it to people with a disability or with an illness that would benefit from assistive technology. And we have to link it to independence. I think that's the way to go. So folks, just in relation to the case study, do you think we've time to just quickly look at the case study? We have 5 minutes? Okay, I have some case studies here. This lady suggested something for her vision, so she probably does need an assessment, doesn't she, for her sight, but also something to help her with her phone. Anybody else got any ideas? Around things that would... Yeah. I'm going to see what this lady is saying is how she's functioning at home and what's happening in the kitchen. The kitchen is a big thing, isn't it? And there might be some simple safety solutions that could help in the kitchen. I was kind of thinking in relation to the kitchen as well, wonder when the accidents were. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Learning.
Yeah, this gentleman is just saying the walking, if you could monitor when she's more likely to fall, then maybe maybe the morning time is the best time for her to go for her walk where she's not feeling tired and that kind of thing. So that...
So following on to that, the effects on the side of the walk, the kilometre moving that side is okay, the walk too.
Yeah. So it's the combination between the walking and the sight, and that's kind of, I suppose we're still talking about assessment here, which is good, but what about assistive technology? Is there any technologies that you think would help kind of straight away? Kitchen aids, yeah, a couple of things for the kitchen could be helpful, for grips and things like that, simple things like that. Anything else that might help? I can't, this lady suggested she use a scooter, what do you think? I don't think she'd be too keen on the scooter, but I don't know. You never know. Well, going to work maybe, yeah.
That she can see on the walking and steps.
Yes, yeah. That's a good idea, yeah. Yeah, this gentleman is saying that if she was able to self-monitor her walking and watch herself when she felt tired and her sight was affecting her, that then she might make decisions around when that's a good idea actually. I was wondering what someone was going to say. You've got 4 kids. They still want an upgrade on the phone. I think an upgrade on the phone is essential, isn't it? Like I'd say this is a smart lady, well able to use IT, and I'd say, get those 4 kids on the job, and they'll soon have her upgraded a very fancy smartphone. And I think that would make a big difference, wouldn't it? So I think definitely the phone upgrade would be good. And it's simple, and it's not it's not as expensive of a solution either. And for phone calls and things like that, because she stopped using her phone. So that would be good. So can we see anybody else got any AT ideas for this lady? Yep. Yeah. I think the house on 3 levels is a big deal, isn't it? And I think that's kind of something that would have to be, discussed. They'd have to look at that as a family and see. But she might not want to move. She might be very happy in her home. Yeah. And down the road, they might have to look at that. And I think that's, nobody wants to leave their home. So it would be, how could it be adapted to suit her if she needed some support down the road? Yeah. Somebody in the earlier group mentioned stair lifts and things like that, but I don't know. We'll have to see if that was appropriate for that lady. Yeah. I think what this lady's saying is important that she can access the whole house, because obviously she's busy with 4 young children. But I think that I think the whole thing about this is that assistive technology might even be able to help her not have to go upstairs every single time. There might be assistive technology that could put in monitors that an intercom could be put in the home where she could press the button. John, have you got the homework done? Come down and show it to me, whatever it happens to be. You know what I mean? Or what is going on up in that room? We put a camera in the room on the young fella, see what he's doing. And there's no ethical issues when it comes to children. You can do what you like. Absolutely joking about that one. But it's about looking, it could help. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But even for herself to have a small, the lady was saying having a falls detector on her smartwatch might help her to know herself. Because it might be a very simple thing. If you discover, look, I never fall before 6 o'clock in the evening. It's only after 7 that I seem to have falls. It's obviously might be related to fatigue or something. So she might be more aware of that. And those kind of things can make a big difference. It's about getting assistive technology that can help, isn't it? And just to make things, so we're not actually suggesting anything to change what she's doing. We're just looking at technologies that will make her life a bit better and make it easier for her. And also to her husband as well. He was anxious, wasn't he? And he'll start interfering more if he's worried about her. So it's you've got to think about the person that's concerned as well. And if assistive technology benefits the carer, I don't think that's such a bad thing. There is some research that says assistive technology is not there for the carer, it's for the person themselves, but sometimes no. Sometimes maybe the carer needs some reassurance as well, and technology can offer that, There is lots of opportunities out there, and I hope I've kind of given you an idea about assistive technology. There is so much research on it. There's so many, I could go through so many different articles about it. But the one thing I would like to alert you to is a lot of the new strategies that look at independent living and the new housing strategy talks about assistive technology. And some of us aren't as aware of that maybe as we should be. So just be careful when you are, because if you're working as a professional and you don't have access to funding for assistive technology, which is an issue, most funding for assistive technology comes through like court awards and things like that. It would be a good idea to have a look at these documents and see where it's mentioned, and it might give you some evidence and some clout to argue for some funding around assistive technology. And if anybody's interested in particular, the housing strategy talks about assistive technology, and there also was assistive technology research done in 2012. If anybody's particularly interested in those, if you email me, I'll email you the documents, okay? Just to save you looking them up. And so I'm just Deirdre.Corby@dcu.ie. If you forget my email address, unfortunately, I'm very easy to find, because I'm the only Corby in DCU. So if you even Google Corby DCU, my whole life story comes up. So if you want to email me, I'm very happy to send you any documents I have or anything that I think might help. So I hope you found this session helpful, because I think we've run out of time, am I right? Yeah. Listen, thanks very much everybody, and I'm around if anyone wants to ask any questions.